Good morning. Very nice of you to stop by. Today is the first week of November, birthday month. Ain't that right, Piyush? Birthday month.
Hello, I am Thanos.
What? There's a lot of things happening this month. Black Panther is coming out. Thanksgiving is almost here. And your birthday is almost here, Pastor Eugene. How do you feel?
I feel my age.
Oh, me too.
54.
You are not 50. It is a big month, November. I love it. And today is the first Monday of November, birthday month. And we're going to be talking about something that we have never talked about before on this podcast. Today we'll be talking about death and the afterlife.
With each birthday.
I don't want to make it like that kind of, yeah. I realize maybe I shouldn't have started off with your birthday. But today we'll be talking about death and the afterlife and the Christian hope of heaven. We'll be talking about all of that and some current events this morning, the first morning of November, first Monday morning of November. You are listening to the Dear Church Podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church Podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
Again, I'm Thanos.
Yep. And we have with us the greatest, the GOAT, Pastor Eugene Kim.
Ooh.
Do you think that if you were a basketball player and I announced you would be happy about it? Like
No.
coming in 6'2", shooting guard. Any hoozle, today, Pastor Eugene, we're going to be talking about death and the afterlife. And I wanted to just quote one of my favorite old people, Benjamin Franklin. And he said, in this world, nothing
Say my
is...
favorite old people?
He's one of them.
Okay.
Older. And he said, in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes. I was hoping you'd chuckle at that one, but not even a smile. Anywho, death is called the great equalizer. It's interesting because every culture has their view of death. Every society, every civilization, every group of people have had their own theories about what death is and the afterlife. One of the things that, I was always curious about in regards to death is how Christians view death. And is it always a bad thing? How do we react to it? Are we happy about it? Are we sad about it? We're not hopeless because of Christ, but how do Christians think about death? What is our attitude towards death? How should we view this?
Yeah, everybody has an eschatology. And everybody, whether you want to say that you are a person of faith or, a person absent of faith in the religious, you have an eschatology. You believe in an eschaton, the end of things. And it could be material. Like, even atheists believe that we're just a blip in this line of time, this timeline. And, creation and life is just a blip in this infinite nothingness. And you can believe that. And then what's fascinating is that during this blip, for some reason, we have come to be evolved to think that there is purpose and meaning to life. Well, that's fascinating. And I think that's what continues to get atheists going. And I think this is where, so in Psalm 14, it says, the fool says there is no God.
I'm wondering, and I think there is kind of this conflict. For a Christian, we know that death means going to be with the Lord. So there is a sense of hopefulness for death. At the same time, there's a sense of sadness. I mean, how do we balance the two? What is the wise way of discerning? What is our attitude towards it, I guess?
Death was introduced with sin, with our first father, Adam, right? Yeah, and so after that, we see death has been introduced into creation. Before that, there was no death because God said everything was good. And so now that death is introduced, we see even from the beginning of Genesis that people started to cry out to the Lord. And we see that people have always wanted relief from death. To say otherwise, I think you'd either be lying to yourself or you're just so deluded. You're going to convince yourself that when you die, you can just be buried and turn into a tree or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very, very sad way of thinking things, especially since we were made for eternity, not as a tree, but eternity as we are now, improving, but yeah, still finite, yes, but in the sense where we can appreciate the things that we appreciate. I think that's what we were made for. And so we talk a lot about that in our podcast, but it definitely is an eschatology that people hold to. And I think it needs to be informed by the word. And so throughout the Bible, we see people want relief from death, and relief finally and ultimately and completely comes through from Jesus Christ. And that's the gospel. And so death is so evil because it takes us away from our purpose and what we were made to do, what we were designed to be. We were designed to be all these things, but death just puts a stop at that. It just, cuts it short. We'll just take one quick example. We were designed to love, right? So we were designed for relationships. We were designed for love. You were made to love your mother. And you love your mother to a great degree. This is what I suspect, and I would imagine, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But then death will take her away. And there is a deep sense of grief and mourning, and rightfully so, because even if you know your mom is dying, like one day she'll pass.
Right.
100%. But even though you know it, it doesn't make things easier, right? It makes us sad to such a deep degree because we were made for this relationship.
Yeah.
And this is what I don't think evolution ever explains. And even the animals know and grieve death. They know something is wrong with death. And so this is something that we see all throughout creation, but we see in ourselves. And again, what people do is we cry out for relief from death. And we can postpone it. We can elongate our lives to as much as we can. But in the end, what is the difference? It's the difference between 70 years, and even people in ancient Egypt lived to around 70 something. Our average median age now, or average age lifespan is around 78 now, maybe 79. So it's not that much different from ancient Egypt, which was 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And so even then, it's not that. I mean, we've had bouts of people living in real times of disease, like when the bubonic plague was there, and our average lifespan really decreased then. But what are you going to extend your life by a cubit? By a few years? What's that gonna do? I think we were made to live in eternity. Just like it says in Ecclesiastes, God has set eternity in the hearts of man. We were made to live forever. And I think that's what the whole hoopla is around death, and why people, even when they celebrate, if you don't know God, you celebrate with, this kind of air, or there's a covering of sadness that one day it's going to go away. I think when I was younger, I had this whole thing before I turned 40, I want to dunk. That has never happened, by the way.
Dunk a basketball.
Yeah, dunk in basketball. Not like a chocolate chip cookie.
Like in-game?
Yeah.
Wow, in-game jam. Wow.
That was a dream. That never happened. But there are things that, you look forward to, but the body deteriorates. The body does start to die. I guess 40 is because that's around the median age, right? If you live to around 70 to 80. And so your body is it's going to turn downhill around the 40s for a man. The testosterone drops steeply after 45, I hear. And so those are things that you want to achieve before, I suppose. But where's the sense of achievement? Why do you want to do these things? Is it simply for legacy? Or because who cares if you can dunk or not? You're not going to leave a legacy. Oh, this dude dunked. Tons of people dunked.
Right.
But why do you want to achieve all these things? Oh, just because I want to be able to do it before I die. And so there's death is always there, present in our achievements, even in our, like losses or misses and things like that.
Mm.
And it's because we have eternity set in our hearts. We want to live forever. And I think the relationship part is big. We want to love our partners forever. We want to love our, the people around us
Mm.
forever because we were made to. And it does point to we were made to love the Lord forever in eternity. He's the source of all life. And when we broke off our connection with God by sin, everything became severed, including life, and death was introduced. And so all of creation is affected by this one man's sin. By Adam's sin, all of creation is affected. And we even know, now we look at satellite pictures of the universe. We know that the universe is expanding. We are literally hurtling into death. That's how fast we're expanding, because once the universe continues, it can't continue to expand forever. As it continues to expand, we're literally getting pulled apart. That's what it is. And what can bring us together? Nothing. Only God. And so we are looking for the impossible. If we're looking at the universe picture, then we're looking for someone or something to pull the universe back together so we don't hurl apart into nothingness. And so how does that happen? It's only God. And I think, before we get into that, I think that's where the whole death thing comes into play. We really want to live forever. It's in our DNA, it's in our spirits to live forever. But it's been corrupted by sin. And because of sin, we are going to die.
So if I could just kind of summarize what you were saying, Pastor Gene, what you're saying is that because human beings have within us, a sense of the divine, a sense of an immortal creator, we also have a sense of immortal life. And that's why when actually every single culture in this world that was ever in existence, they always have a problem with death. Death is the greatest problem that they face. And that's why they always have, even in every single religion, death is always the problem. And we always try to, in no matter what, society it is, we always try to fix death. And you brought up even, prolonging life. And I mean, modern day medicine, technology, that's what we try to do, right? We try to lengthen the life, um, push death off until later on. And so it's because God has created us with a sense of immortal life, right? Is that
Yeah.
what it is?
I mean, everything points to eternity. Even the moral law points to there being an eternalness in our being. Why have morality if we're not eternal, right? And so there's no point. But yet people do have this deep sense of right and wrong. They do believe that it affects creation. Even the psychos that are like going for this climate change nonsense, where it's the new religion now, we need to like go to zero emissions or something like that. It's become a religion. Why? Because it points to eternity. Everything always points to eternity. And so we want to extend 10, 20 years. But if you think really deeply about it, we really want to extend our lives forever.
Mm.
And, what the Bible is showing us is our lives are forever. We will either be in eternal death in punishment or eternal life with God. And that is solely dependent on if you have a covenant with the Lord and Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. Otherwise, you are still bound by the covenant of works, which Adam failed. And so you are going into, that punishment.
So knowing as Christians, knowing the truth that death is an entry into eternity, I'm wondering, I guess, and I keep on coming back to this question because I'm just curious as to how our posture should be towards death. And I bring this up even from Philippians chapter 1. In Philippians chapter 1, verse 21 to 24, Paul writes, "For To me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. If I'm to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me, yet which I shall choose, I cannot tell. I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better, but to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account. And so, as Christians, it would seem here that Paul is split between wanting to die and be with the Lord versus staying here on this earth and doing what God has called him to do. So, how do we kind of, what is our attitude towards death in this manner?
Yeah, I think it's right that we see death as tragic and we see death as a loss. However, in Christ, we see that there is ultimate gain at the
Hmm.
end of death.
Right.
And so, if you are a Christian like Paul was, then by dying, you are in great gain. But at the same time, like you said, he is struggling with him staying here and fulfilling any task that God has given him, but he'd rather be with God, obviously.
Right. Right. Right.
And so for the Christian, death is still tragic. However, we know that we got to do our work here, but that it points to eternity. That means he doesn't take the work here lightly. And I don't think we were meant to think of it like that either. So some people think, oh, you're going to die, you're going to go to heaven anyway. And then it's weird that we even convince ourselves that death is nothing since they're in heaven, blah, blah, blah. I think that leads us to a fatalistic way of thinking. But when we think that all the things that we do here still continues on and it points to eternity, because what does it say in 1 Corinthians 15? Death has lost its sting. Oh, maybe you could read that section too. The end of 1 Corinthians 15.
First Corinthians chapter 15, verse 54 to 58 reads, when the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain.
Yeah, so that last verse is so important that he connects it with, oh, death, where is your sting, right?
Mm.
Because the work that we do now here continues to point forward to eternity. It will continue to go on. It will not be swallowed up. It will not be burned. It will last, and it will provide for us a crown that God has prepared. So that's why you want to continue to do the work here and not just think, well, let me just die and go to heaven. God has set us up here right now in this current state to do work for him. And so that's why we got to work hard. But when that time is done, in his perfect wisdom, he will take us to himself. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why we labor the way we do. We know that every life has been set for a purpose. And so when we also try to usurp that and we kill people, that's why it's such a terrible thing, because we're going against God's will. We're not loving the things that he loves. We're not setting ourselves or our hearts according to his purpose. And that's why we think even abortion is such a grave sin. It's such an evil sin. Now people are just like, well, it's just a bad thing. I don't think it's a good thing to do. But, I wouldn't really condemn the woman who do it. No, no, no. I think we should condemn those that do murder, that commit abortions and things like that. And so we want to continue to go with what is true, what is good, what is righteous, what is beneficial, what is noble, what is pure, all those things. We want to continue to go toward that. And so if we see that death is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And because of Jesus Christ, we see that death is now swallowed up. It's now death has become a blip. And so its ultimate sting has been taken away. Its power has been taken away and is swallowed up through the victory of Jesus Christ. And so that's where we go towards.
I wanted to move on to some controversial questions.
Hot takes.
I wanted to move on to some controversial questions. So knowing then that as a Christian, we have hope in eternity after death because Christ has defeated death. And at the same time, understanding that our life here, our calling here is important as God has assigned us to a task to glorify him in the specific ways that he desires for our individual lives. So knowing those two things, as a Christian, is it always the case that we should prolong life and push death? And the reason why I ask this is because modern technology, the medical field, we are always trying to prolong life and push death. Is it then a Christian's attitude, a Christian's posture to always prolong life? For example, is it wrong for Christians to have a DNR, do not resuscitate? Is it wrong? Is it wrong for Christians to stop treatment for a terminal illness, knowing that it'll drain funds from the family? Is it wrong to ever do any of these things, knowing that life is precious, but at the same time, we have a hope that goes beyond the grave? And so, how do we kind of think through that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't go to the extremes, obviously. We don't just go around willy
Right,
nilly killing people, but
right,
then
right,
there
right.
will be some difficult decisions to make. Um, Things like ectopic pregnancies,
Hmm.
we don't consider it murder, and yet it is an ending of a life, but that life would not have been able to survive.
Right.
But if not treated, then the ectopic pregnancy would have put the mother's life in danger. So those are like really difficult decisions to make, and this is something that we have not shied away from. There are difficult situations, but with each situation, we should be prayerful and mindful that our decisions need to come from that basic foundational knowledge that life is precious,
Mm.
each life has dignity. It doesn't mean that we should prolong life where the person is in incredible agony for
Right.
like 24/7
Right.
for
Right.
what?
Right.
So he's going to be in incredible agony for, you know, 24 hours a day. So he can either die, or we can actually inject him with something that'll make him stay alive another 24 hours, but in incredible agony. So those are like questions that people pose.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think when a Christian yearns to see Christ, they know when their time is, and that time should be joyful, it should be peaceful. We try to make it as peaceful as possible. So that kind of theology leads to that eschatology, where we want to, make that transition peaceful as much as we can. That's what we pray for. I don't want you to die, Sam, a
Thank
painful
you.
death, writhing in pain and agony. I don't want
Thank
that for
you.
you, right? Right. I want you to have a nice one. But if possible, if we're tortured, we're tortured, that kind of thing. If we're in
Right.
Iran, you might have been tortured, or China, you might be tortured.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, 100%, you'll be
Mm.
tortured. And so those are things that you keep in mind. But why would I want you to be tortured? That's not something that we look forward to,
Mhm. Mhm.
or something that we want. And so I guess a real life example could be my grandma had a stroke/heart attack. I think a piece of like calcium, some calcium deposit broke off from her skull or something like that, and it went through her blood vessel
Mhm.
all the way to her heart. And once it hit her heart, she had a heart attack, and then she lost like 90% of her organ functions. And you could keep her alive, but she was in incredible pain, even with the morphine that we were giving her. And then when
Right.
I visited her, this is kind of morbid, but this is real life, I suppose. When I did visit her, I saw her in incredible pain. And, do I want that for her? That kind of thing. So there is this area that we need to be prayerful and mindful of. So, when you pray, like you could ask me how I prayed. I prayed that God would alleviate her pain,
Mhm.
either right now or by taking her from us. And then people were wondering if we should stop the morphine drip and just, stop
Right.
any kind of
Right.
care, that she would die immediately, blah, blah, blah. And as we were wondering, she did pass like just a few days later.
Mm.
And so God did take her to himself just a few days later, which I'm very thankful for. And so there is this trust in God, and there is this still um, like place of where you are thinking, well, I don't know everything. I absolutely don't know everything, especially when it comes to death. I don't know exactly how I'm going to go,
Right.
or how I should go. But I do know this, that there's work here. And as long as I'm able to do it, I must do it to glorify God. And if you understand that, that's where the why the therefore in 1 Corinthians 15 is there. You want to do everything you can while you still can.
Mm.
You don't want to hold anything back. Serve the Lord with all of your heart, mind, soul, strength. Love Him in that manner. Glorify Him. And, this is something that we look forward to. So when you ask, let's say, a question like, well, what about this situation? What about that situation? Those are rough situations. I have no doubt
Yeah.
that whatever you and your family decided was very difficult. What we are trying to say here is, or at least what I'm trying to say is, it needs to be done prayerfully, and you need to have a right theology. Otherwise, you will regret the decisions that you make. And we don't want that, right? You don't want to be like, wow, I shouldn't have done that. That was done, um, incorrectly,
Yeah.
or, even worse, in sin.
Mhm.
And so that's not what we want for anybody.
What does Christian grieving look like?
Uh, I would suppose it's different from any other religion,
Mhm.
because Christian grieving is grieving that we are at a loss, but it's a loss for a time.
Mhm.
So if you believe in, I don't know, what is it, reincarnation, or
Oh, yeah.
you believe in the absolute nothingness, or, that kind of thing, that grieving is permanent. You will never get your mom back. You will never get,
Right. Right.
but Christian grieving is not that.
Mhm.
That separation is only for a time. And I lost my grandparents now, all four of them, but there will be a time where I'm reunited, and you look forward to that. But
Right.
during that time, there is that sense of loss. There is that sense of grieving. You do want to see him again and things like that. But ultimately, we see them in the Lord. We see them when we look at we look at their grandkids, right?
Yeah.
Or great grandkids, right? That kind of thing. When you have kids of your own, you see that kind of hint there, but it really does point to, we will meet together in heaven, and it will be in Christ. Christ is the one that's gathering us in His table for all eternity, where we get to dine, we get to fellowship with the King and with one another.
Is there a distinction between how Christians are to grieve in the death of a believer versus the death of a non-believer?
Yeah, I think there should be worship. I think that's the key difference. We worship God, and we thank Him for the life that He has allowed us to experience. We thank Him for just the grace that we saw through the life that we were able to experience. But I think it's right that we grieve.
Mhm.
I don't think you should be like, oh, He's in heaven, so, well, let's party, that kind of thing. I think
Right.
that it's right that we grieve, like I said before, because there is that separation. Otherwise, I think we were meant to do that. Our spirits will grieve. If you kind of deny that, then you'll end up like, pushing down these emotions
Yeah.
that you need. So I think the Christian way of grieving is the healthiest, because it's not an ultimate end.
Yeah.
So it's not a grieving that is absolute, but that grieving is for a time.
Right.
And so it's like Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There's times to mourn, there's
Mhm.
times to celebrate.
Mhm.
And yeah, you would presume that when someone passes, it's time to mourn. But yeah, well, we worship God because that death isn't permanent, and that God will eventually resurrect the bodies. And we didn't get into that, but when we die, what happens?
Yeah.
What happens, Sam?
Our souls go to heaven, but our bodies stay in the grave until the last day.
Until the resurrection day,
Yeah.
right? And so this is what we believe, that God will resurrect us on that last day with our bodies. But before that, we'll stay with Him, our souls, in heaven as He prepares to come.
Where do we see that in the Bible, by the way?
The parousia.
The fact that, where do we see the fact that our souls go to heaven, whereas our bodies stay in the grave? Like, where do we even see that?
I think, again, that's eschatology, but we
Mhm.
see that in a lot of places. A lot of places.
Yeah.
Well, let's go one by one. Let's go to where we see resurrection, period. Okay.
Okay.
Resurrection, where our bodies will be resurrected and go to their eternal destinations,
Uh,
is even from the Old Testament in Daniel chapter 12, verse 2.
Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 reads, And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt.
Hmm. And so there's that.
Mm.
All of Romans 6 talks about being baptized, going down into death, but
Mhm.
also being raised with him. We can talk about what you read about Philippians 1,
Yeah.
and, to depart is to be with Christ. And so there is that physical resurrection,
Mhm.
but to depart would be immediacy with Christ. So we can say that. And then so there are a bunch of places. I guess if you want a specific verse,
The thief, right?
the thief on the cross,
Yeah.
yeah, you could read that one.
In Luke chapter 23, verse 43, Jesus says to one of the thieves, and he said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." And so I guess the emphasis is on that today, right? Immediately.
Yeah, yeah. Romans 6:20. No, Romans 6:5.
Romans 6 5 reads, "For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his."
Yeah, and so Jesus was in the grave for 3 days. We will die, but
Yeah.
we will rise again. Maybe not in 3 days, but we
Mhm.
will rise again, certainly. And that's what the Bible assures us of. And like you've said, um, but when he was in the grave, it wasn't like he was just like twiddling his thumbs in the grave until his body resurrected again. His
Mhm.
spirit was with God,
Right.
right?
So when we read these texts, are we just kind of not guessing, are we deducing that because Jesus says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," but at the same time, we see that the bodies in the grave will resurrect on the last day? Are we deducing from these things that, oh, then the soul must be the part of the human that goes to heaven? Is that what we're saying?
Deducing, or just, going by what the Bible is showing us.
Yeah.
I think the Bible is showing us. The Father draws us, like it says in John 6, and then we were once dead, but if you look to God, and then the Father drawing you, all that stuff that we
Mhm.
talked about,
Right.
we will be there. I think this is just something that we really believe in.
Yeah.
In the end, I do believe that that's what salvation means,
Mhm.
right? Salvation is both body and soul.
Mhm.
And so, if you really believe that, then it's not about deducing whether we will be in heaven or in, you know, hell.
Yeah.
It's not about deduction. It's about just knowing that if you are in Christ, you will be in heaven. And exactly how that plays out is shown to us in the Bible.
Mhm.
Like, the Bible won't say, like, when you die, your soul goes to heaven.
Right.
Like, it doesn't say that, but it shows us that, like
Mhm.
with the passages that you've read.
Gotcha.
And so I don't know if that's really a deduction or it's just what it shows us,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so it's not like we need to take 3 steps to get there.
Yeah. Right,
Yeah.
right, right. I wanna go back to Christian grieving, because I know we talked about grieving for a Christian death, but what about for a non-Christian? Because for believers, people that may pass, people that are close to us, near and dear to us, are not always believers.
hmm
What is the appropriate way or the correct way of grieving for a non-Christian's death?
Well, we understand that ultimately salvation belongs to God. And salvation, as God has revealed it, is in the Lord Jesus Christ and Him alone.
Yeah.
It's Jesus Christ who says that I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me.
Hmm.
So you can't get to heaven. You can't get to God. Heaven is obviously where God resides, right? And so you
Yeah.
can't get to God without Jesus Christ or without going through Jesus Christ. And so if a person has, denied, rejected Jesus Christ all their life, then they are not in heaven. And then people are like, well, what about that last millisecond? God can do this. He
Right.
can reveal
Right.
himself, and maybe that last millisecond they believe. It's possible. It's possible that God could do it, but probably not.
Mm.
You know why? Because He makes us do all these things before in our lives. And so He wants us to show and bear fruit. That's His will. Why would He just all of a sudden on a regular basis, it's possible. So But because of that possibility, I do believe that we should have that humility. Salvation is in God, and it's only through Jesus Christ. So I cannot affirm this person's faith because that's what the church does. The church affirms this person's faith by their fruits. But while I can affirm it, I don't know for 100% certainty. But that affirmation is what the church is supposed to do. And so if I cannot affirm someone's faith and they died, presumably in their sins, without repentance or forgiveness, then what I can do is declare the salvation that is in Jesus Christ to all
Yeah.
those that are there. And I think that's what we ought to do. So that was a long turn for me to eventually say this, but you don't know. You can't declare nothing. Then what you do is you continue to go straight to the gospel and preach the gospel. Because even with a believer's death, you preach the gospel because it's the gospel that saved him, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Jesus Christ that saved them. So you would preach the gospel even in a believer's death, but you would also preach the gospel in a non-believer's death. And so, you and I were both in funerals where the person was obviously a non-believer. What do we do? Or we're not sure, right? That kind of thing. We would preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And so people have asked me, would you do a non-believer's funeral? I would say absolutely, but I would not say that this person is in heaven. As long as that person's okay with that, their family's okay with that, and I would do
Right.
their funeral, because a funeral is where you would go and proclaim the gospel to those that are there. To the living, there is still a chance that they would hear the gospel and their hearts would be turned.
So, reflecting on the hope that we have through Christ and in Christ, what will heaven be like? Because, there are some views that it's a fluffy place.
No. It's going to be golf where you always hit the fair. No, I don't know. I don't think we could say things like that, but yeah. Yeah.
Is it?
Golf might be the sport of hell.
Oh my goodness.
Imagine in hell, all you do is play golf and you just keep on hitting it into the rough.
Probably volleyball. But I'm wondering because we read in the Bible of streets of gold, and just jewels, precious jewels, and pearls, and we see that there is no need for the sun because God is the light. Is that what it looks like? I mean, you've never been there, obviously. I've never been there. But do we take those verses literally where we think, okay, this is actually what it looks like? It's actually, there's streets of actual gold. AG, as the periodic table would say. Is it AU? Anywho. So, what is heaven like? Is there going to be food there? Is there meat there? Because if there's meat there, that means there was death. When we know that there's no death in heaven, so does that mean there's no meat there? Does that mean everyone's a vegetarian there? Meaning that should we all be vegetarians here to prepare? Like what does heaven look like?
There's a lot of questions. The
It
answer
is.
is no. You should not be a vegetarian here, even if there's no meat in heaven. That's ridiculous. God is the one that killed animals and ate. Jesus actually eats fish, so fish die.
True. I love fish.
And so I'm sure he ate meat too.
Yeah.
And so if he didn't, it would have definitely been something notable. But yeah, he
He's a
ate what
Passover
everybody.
lamb.
What?
Passover lamb.
Yeah, he ate the
definitely
lamb,
ate.
right?
Yeah.
And so on a regular basis is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And so there is nothing in the Bible that tells me that we should be vegetarians here. However, in heaven, I don't know. I always speculated, and this is pure speculation.
Yeah.
People should not take this as canon or anything scriptural, okay? But I imagine that there were meat tasting fruit or fruit that tasted like meat before the fall.
That's rough. Oh my goodness.
And then you would eat this fruit and it would taste like chicken.
No.
But we
no.
lost it. So we got to eat the animals to
No.
get the food.
That's rough.
Because how else are you going to make stew?
That's
But yeah, I
true.
mean, but then those things, and all joking aside, these like crazed vegans or Christians who are in this vegan stage. So there are vegans out there that aren't Christian. I'm not saying anything about them, but there are Christians who are vegans. And that doesn't make any sense, right? Because
This
our
is
Lord
gonna be
didn't do that.
rough.
Yeah. The Lord didn't do that. And this is something I would ask you to reevaluate yourself then. there are vegetarians. So even in Corinthians, there were vegetarians that came into the faith
Uh-huh.
and they remained, or people who were very distraught that this meat was given up to idols. And Paul calls them weak in faith, right?
Yeah.
So I don't doubt that there will be people weak in their faith, but weakness should not last forever. That's the point.
Yeah.
So if you are starting off and you're thinking like, I have trouble with meat, that means you're weak in your faith. That means you're a beginner Christian. As long as you could admit that, I'm willing to stand alongside you, not eat the meat, and, let's have like vegetable parties. But I can't do that forever. It's going to be like a week most.
This is rough.
This one won't make the cut.
This one is rough.
Maybe that'll be in the post cuts. But yeah. But seriously speaking, to be serious now, in heaven, obviously there won't be any killing,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so you won't have to kill to get your meat or your satisfaction. That's the point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if you think right now this meat can only bring you this level of satisfaction, the answer is no. In heaven, you won't need this killing to have that satisfaction. That's
Right.
something that we should also look forward to.
Yeah.
That means I will be fully satisfied without killing and that kind of thing. The lion will lie down with the lamb, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then we will need weapons of war because, the war is over.
Yeah.
And so those are things that we can look forward to. How exactly that will play out, I don't know. Will we still have, stew up in heaven? I don't know what it's going to look like. I would imagine, if anything, it would be better. And so will we be able to eat? I think the answer is yes to that one, because when Jesus resurrected, he ate with his disciples, and he said, and he drank with his disciples, and he said, I won't drink this cup again. When he does the Last Supper, he said, I won't drink this cup, or I won't drink this fruit of the vine until I'm with you in heaven, right?
Mm.
So he says he won't drink that cup. So that means he will in the end, right?
Right.
So there will be drinking, there will be feasting, there will be eating. And we know this for sure because our bodies were made to eat and drink.
Yeah.
Like, what's the function of our digestive system if it's not going to eat or drink? Is that a result of the fall? Absolutely not. It's part of our creation. And so we were made to do all these things. We were made to enjoy food. We were made to enjoy fellowship around the table. It's part of what God has designed. And it's all a great thing that we are able to do that. But we'll do that with a level of perfection in satisfaction and enjoyment in heaven. That's what it is.
So fully satisfied. Fully and completely satisfied.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in the sense where, we'll still eat, but we won't eat where we're like, in a sense of deprivation. Nothing to that effect.
Yeah. What do you think you will look like in your resurrected body? Do we get to choose what age we so if you pass away at 90?
Yeah. So what age was Adam created in? Age 0. He was born from day 1, but did he look like an infant baby? Obviously no, right?
What age was he? I've never thought of that. How old was he?
His body. So was it in like an 18-year-old's body, or a 20-year-old's body, or a 40-year-old's body, or a 60-year-old's body, right? But it was in that perfect state. That's what we'll be in. Okay, we'll be in a perfect state. And I think that's why Jesus's body was somewhat unrecognizable.
Yeah.
1, because of his glory, but 2, also because he was in his perfect bodily state that we were able to see. So it wasn't his exact age. Was 33. It might have been something else. I don't know. So again, this is speculation. If I were to speculate, it would probably be around 45. I think that's the perfect age. But, it really depends on what that perfection is, and that is according to God's perfect will. So I would trust that.
Wait, wasn't Jesus not fully glorified yet? So didn't he still have the holes in his hands and stuff like that? So he wasn't bodily glorified yet when he resurrected?
So that's you're going into a deeper theological dispute territory.
I didn't even know that was so deep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
You don't
much.
think he'll have scars on his hands in heaven to remind us forever
No,
what
I'm not
was
saying
accomplished
anything.
on the
No,
cross?
no, I'm not saying anything. I'm just asking. Like, because
So are you
doesn't
saying that when he resurrected, he wasn't fully resurrected? So
no, no,
that's an issue
no,
right there
he
then.
was. No, he definitely was. But I'm wondering
So
because
why were the scars there? The scars were there to show us. They were there for our benefit. So even Jesus Christ is the epitome. He is the paragon. He is the perfection, but he is also a perfection of his love for us. It's shown to us in his manifestation. And so, you're speculating on things that um, we won't know.
when Christ resurrects, Mary tries to cling to him, and he says, "Don't cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father." Right? And had understood that to be for he's not fully glorified yet. So his body isn't fully glorified yet. Is that not the case? So are we saying that when Christ came out of the tomb and saw Mary, he was in his glorified state already at that point?
But he wasn't seated yet. He
Right.
still was doing work. That's what it means. Like he hasn't gone up away from them yet. Do not cling to me, for I have not been, for I need to go to my Father. Or you could read the verse exactly. We could go through that verse.
So this is John chapter 20, verse 17. I'll actually read it from verse 16.
Mhm.
Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. Jesus said to her, Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord, and that he had said these things to her.
Yeah, and then when we recite the Apostles' Creed or Nicene Creed, we say Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father. Seated
Yes.
means his work is done and now he is ruling, he is judge.
Right.
And so when we think about like, is he completely, fully glorified? We're talking about that. He's not yet seated. That means there's still some work for him to do, which he did while he was here, right? That's why there's, Pentecost, that celebration before Pentecost, Jesus stayed with them. And he taught them even after his resurrection. And then he ascended in Acts chapter 1, right?
Yeah.
And when you're asking, does it refer to his body? I think the answer is no. I could be wrong, but here's why. I do believe that those scars were there in his perfectly bodily resurrected state as a symbol and not as a hindrance to the physical body. So those scars, if they are there, it's there because it's continually going to be there to show us what he has done. Okay. So they'll be there as symbolically, not as like, oh no, I can't pick
Like a
things up
scar,
because
right,
I can't
right.
pick things up because there's a hole in my hand.
Right.
I'm somehow less than what I should be. So I don't think that's going to be the case.
Uh-huh.
If they're not there, then that's something that, that we can also understand that will still somehow, symbolically, some other way, always be reminded of Christ's atoning work for us. Because that's why we're there. We're in heaven because of what Christ has done for us.
Yeah.
So that reminder will always also be there. That remembrance is a huge part of Christian worship. And so I don't think that's going to disappear just because we're in heaven. We're not going to remember anymore. So that reminder is always going to be there. And so that's where I personally think.
So in Revelation, we see Jesus looking a certain way. And we know that Revelation is to be symbolic, but we see Jesus looking a certain way versus the description that we see in the Gospels after his resurrection. How do we
Yeah, John's easy, simple answer is, and of course it could go much deeper, is that John's vision of the Son of Man was exactly that. It was a vision. With visions, there's a ton of symbolism.
Okay.
There are reasons why he saw certain things in that symbolism. Is to highlight certain things, is to show us certain things, is to show us what's to come,
Right.
is to identify who he is, right? That kind of thing. And so how did Jesus identify himself to John in the vision as someone, with a long robe, a golden sash around his chest. His hair was like this, his head was like this, his eyes were like this, right?
Mm.
His voice was like this. It's to show us what he is like. Um, and a lot of revelation, like you mentioned, right? Pearly gates, and
Yeah.
streets of gold,
Right.
sapphire. Is it actually gonna be made out of pearls? The answer is no, because pearls, as we know it, are not infinite. They don't last forever, but
Mhm.
they are like pearls in its brilliance, in its beauty, in its exoticness. The appreciation that we have for
Mhm.
beauty when we look at certain jewels, right? That's going to be there. That's the point of the vision, okay?
Yeah.
And so that's what we should take away. But if you're saying, well, Peach, are you saying that there will be no pearls in heaven? It's like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it will not be the pearls that we know now, right?
Right.
If it's pearls, then it's going to be, different kinds of pearls, not the ones that we have, not the chemical makeup what we have now, where
Mhm.
it eventually
Mhm.
deteriorates.
Thank you for that question, Junzo.
Jinzai has really good questions. It
Well, it
makes
was
us
kind of
think,
like a
right? Yeah.
cooperation type of thing. Yeah.
Because you were thinking it in your head, and Jinzai automatically like,
So if I'm gonna be honest, this is exactly what happened. Chinzo opened the Bible and I saw that it was towards the end. I thought, oh, Revelation. And I said, oh, Revelation. Like, oh shoot, I think what if, and then the question that Chinzo asked was the question that was in my mind because I saw him opening to the end. Anyway, anywho, in contrast to what we just talked about, what heaven will look like, what will hell look like? Because there are so many shows, so many cartoons of hell being this red place and the devil runs it, which is not true. We've talked about this on the podcast that the king of hell, the ruler of hell is God. What does hell look like? What is it going to be like? Is it really torturous like we see in all the cartoons where you're just burning 24/7? And do people want to get out of there?
yeah, I think a lot of theologians have said different things, even things contrary to one another. And these are good people too. Again, we don't know for sure, but we do know what we have been shown, and it's Gehenna. It's going to be a fiery place of piling garbage, trash, right? It's going to be this fiery place where there will be death and there will be torment. You'll be punished for your sin. It's going to be terrible. That's one thing for sure.
Yeah.
And some people have said there can't be any fire because fire brings forth light. And my response to theologians that say that is there's going to be fire because Jesus said there will be fire. Maybe that fire won't bring forth light, but there will be fire. There will be agony, like being burned alive. Is torturous. It brings forth a ton of agony.
Yeah.
So that's something that we ought to keep in mind when Jesus says, "Hell is like this." You'll be in eternal flame and fire. I think we should take it as such. Okay. I get that, there will be no light because light is good and there'll be no goodness in hell.
Mhm.
I get why theologians go there. And then I think for me, I'll start with Gehenna. I'll start with what Jesus continues to talk about because who talked about hell the most in the Bible? It's Jesus, right?
Mm.
So he's warning people to watch out for this thing.
There is this idea that obviously people don't want to go to hell. But is that really a biblical idea? Or that people don't that people
I think you have an answer for this. This is a very pointed question. I
no
think you have an
no, no,
answer.
no, this is unpointed. So so people think that people wouldn't want to go to hell and people would obviously want to leave hell. Is that what we see?
That's not what we see here in life. We're literally seeing people would rather burn everything to the ground than live in, let's say, um, a country where a president that you don't like leads it.
Mhm.
So you'd rather burn all the buildings to the ground, something like that. So, yeah, there are people who would rather be in hell than to have anything decent or good. We see that, you know, I get why some people could see that statement as somewhat political, but to be honest, it points to the greater king. You don't want to be next to Jesus. You'd rather be in hell. I think that's absolutely true. You'd rather be burning like a pile of trash in Gehenna than be with God. And if you hate God that much, the answer is yes. And while you're burning, you'll still complain. You'll still hate God. And I think we see a key example in Jesus' parable with Lazarus and the rich man. The rich man blames God for not doing enough uh, to save him. That's why he didn't believe. He didn't do enough. That's why if he just did enough, he wouldn't be there. That's why he tells Abraham
To send Lazarus.
send Lazarus to preach to his brothers.
Brothers,
Yeah, they won't go to hell. He still feels entitled. He asks Abraham to tell Lazarus to dip his finger in water and then put it on his tongue to alleviate. So he still thinks Lazarus is his slave or someone below him when he's in heaven. And thirdly, he doesn't ask to get out.
Right. That's what really just boggles my mind.
Yeah, there's nobody in hell like climbing the walls, like trying to get me out of this place.
Right.
They're there. They're complaining. That's every picture that we see of hell in the Bible. They're there because in the end, they hate God that much.
Mm.
Our rebellion comes into full fruition when we die, same as our salvation comes into full fruition when we die for the Christian. For the non-Christian, our rebellion comes into full fruition. You go into the extreme. And you know, this is what the Bible is saying. You'll be punished for all the evil deeds and the careless words that you spoke.
Mm. Thank you for that. It is truly a scary thought indeed. So I guess thinking about, death, thinking about the resurrection, thinking about the afterlife, heaven and hell, what will the last day look like? There are a lot of different views on this. Obviously, there are some people that believe that people will be taken up. Others believe that, well, no, the Avengers show us that you'll kind of disintegrate. Um, so, what does the last day look like? Actually, that wasn't the last day, huh? That was just Thanos. Speaking of Thanos, you said you were Thanos today. So, yeah. Anyway,
You know
so
what Thanos means? It means death.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Thank you. So what does the last day look like? We know that we don't know when it will be.
We do know exactly what it's going to look like.
No, no, no.
Alien
When?
ships come. They
Ah,
look like squids. No, that's not it.
isn't that Avengers? Anyway, um,
Matthew chapter 24, verse 29 to 31.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 29 to 31 reads, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
Yeah, any interpretation from this comes from what kind of eschatology you hold on to, whether you're a premillennialist or an amillennialist or a post-millennialist. And so for short, we have been saying in our podcast, pre-mill, am-mill, post-mill. And so those are the interpretations. Or it could be like you could be a preterist as well.
Yeah.
And those are all things that we have discussed in the podcast, but this is what it is. It's going to look like this. Jesus tells us. Beyond this, we don't know, like you said. Beyond this, we don't know, but we do know this, that in those days, there will be great grieving and mourning, especially by the powers of the earth. The current powers will be disintegrated because Jesus, the ultimate power, is going to come, and he's going to take over rightfully the government. It will be placed on his shoulders like it had prophesied in Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to gather his elect from all the four corners of the earth. So from every single place on earth, he's going to bring them together to himself. And then his righteous rule will last for eternity. And so that's something that we learn from, and that, that's something that we should hold in mind. Exactly how that plays out again could be part of your eschatology But then we do know that this will play out because it is in the word that Christ has spoken.
Thank you for that. And this is the day that we look forward to, the final consummation of all things. Actually, we look forward to it so much that one of us has a tattoo of it on their wrist. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And at this time, at this juncture in our podcast, I'd like to go into some current events. So we're gonna play the jingle that Peter Lim didn't make, and this is the good jingle. Today, we spoke of death, and very recently, actually last week, there was a tragedy that happened in Seoul, South Korea, where there was a Halloween um, party, I guess an outdoor party, which turned into a deadly stampede. And I think as when I checked or when I heard it was 150 deaths. I don't know if that death toll has risen, but it was 150 when I had heard. And it was just a horrible tragedy. 100,000 people squished into this one narrow street. People were crushed to death, suffocated to death, and there were just bodies on the floor as people continue to drink and party. Um, and it kind of shows you a hellish type of picture if you think about it. Um, but Pastor Gene, um, how do we view tragedies like this? And there is a great podcast by Albert Mohler called The Daily Briefing where he did talk about this, and he brought up some interesting points about crowd mentality. How when people are gathered together, there's a different mentality that people have. Could you just comment on this event, on this tragic event, and how Christians are to view situations like this, and how we are to pray for situations like this?
Yeah, it's called mob mentality. But when the mob gets together, it becomes a mob because all of a sudden you think as one and then you go down as one, you panic as one. And so a lot of people died in, I believe it's Itaewon, right?
Yep.
I was
Yep.
wondering what you were going to ask me this week,
Oh,
but I
yeah.
guess it's this one. Yeah. Um, and when I first read it, I was really, really upset for a lot of reasons. And not just because of the stupidity of what mobs, kind of, bring out in people, but just because we are in a place where we are bereft of any kind of or a semblance of understanding, like this is not a good thing. Uh, it's not good to go down a street with 100,000 people uh, to celebrate that we can finally have Halloween without a mask on. I believe that
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
lot of the things. So people were dead set on celebrating and partying and drinking. So that's why you see, even though all these people died, they're like, well, I'm here to celebrate, so I'm going to celebrate anyway. So it's not about this is a tragedy. I'm just going to do what I was set out to do. So people don't care about those deaths. Some people didn't. I guess some people didn't celebrate. I would imagine some people went home after that. There are a lot of stories coming out about that area because 100,000 people is a lot of people, about how other people survived and how people were just crushed. And then I started to read stories about what to do in a crowd, or if there's a crowd surge, where you should be. Like,
Yeah.
never take off your backpack, because people think if you take off your backpack, like you think you will have a little more breathing room, but in effect, what you do is you're setting up all these other people behind you to trip over and fall and set up
Oh,
for
wow.
more deaths. And don't go near a wall, because a lot of people think like by going near a wall I'll have relief, but in fact it's when you get pushed into walls where you get crushed.
Yeah.
And so uh, a lot of the people that died were women.
Mm.
They were young women who were
Teenage women, I
weaker.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, they're weaker than men because they didn't know, they can't survive that physical
Yeah.
pressure. It's sad because Itaewon, I think, is known for all their expatriates, people like who are perhaps U.S. citizens that are working there. They bring their U.S. culture, and apparently they brought their culture celebrating Halloween in the way that a lot of secular U.S. people celebrate Halloween. And so they brought that over to Korea. Korea doesn't know anything about Halloween. What's so Korean about Halloween? Nothing is Korean about Halloween. So that's why all these young people were there, because they were influenced by Western culture,
Mm.
expat culture, and things like that. So I do think that it's a sad state of affairs. I think the young people, it just shows us how much young people in Korea need Christ, and why the church, or how the church is failing to reach these young people with the gospel. We need more strong churches. We need churches that proclaim the truth. We don't need anything watered down. We don't need a youth group in Korea. We need a church in Korea that can uh, boldly and correctly proclaim the truth of Jesus Christ, that in Jesus you are saved.
Mm.
And I think that's where you have to start. I think it is a sad thing. I think I've heard many other, side stories about what happened, or how some people survived by funneling into stores and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think bottom line is, if it were to happen even here, please don't do that. If there's a crowd, I don't see why you have to go to the crowd.
Mm.
I would avoid crowds, but that's my personality. If I really need to celebrate by keeping a good, safe distance around you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even trying to be facetious here. This is serious talk. You don't need to be jam packed with, 100,000 other people to have a good time,
Mm.
where you can't even breathe. And I think you brought up another concert that happened that's similar, but only 6 people died, right?
I think it was 9,
9
maybe. It
people?
was the
Yeah.
Travis Scott Astroworld
Yeah.
conference. We talked about this one, I think, too.
Yeah, because that was also on your mind. And people like that performer really enjoyed that people died, right? Or something to that
Or he
effect.
egged it on to a certain extent.
Yeah. And so that's where, we see this kind of culture of death and promulgation of
Yeah.
pain and suffering is really coming alive,
Yeah.
because we don't value life. And so that darkness really is penetrating our young people and their culture, and something that we got to watch out for.
Thank you for that. Another current event. Wow, what a treat. We have 2 today. Um, Anne Hathaway on my favorite show, The View. Sorry. I hate that show. Anne Hathaway on The View said that abortion is a mercy. And I know that this is something that you wanted to discuss as well, and how just evil and disillusioned that statement is. So could you just possibly comment on this terrible quote?
Yeah. Yeah. This is something that really disturbed me when I saw the clip of Anne Hathaway, a fellow New Jerseyan, by the way, said, first of all, she, talked up abortion as if it was a human right in her interview with the ladies of The View. So it's not just women's rights. Women are a part of the human race, so it's a human right. And then continuing down this kind of language change, changing what rights mean, is what we are constantly seeing. And people like people in the media are leading that charge, and people being interviewed by the media are just doing whatever they can. You got to be at the forefront of the left. So you got to be left of the left if you really want to be celebrated by the media. And so what she said was, in the end, abortion is like a mercy, which is really rough for me to even say
Yeah.
or repeat. Yeah, we have something called mercy killings. And mercy killings is another word for euthanasia. It's a very sad, sad thing to mercy kill, let's say, your dog who might have gotten rabies by being bit by another rabid animal. It's a very sad thing to do, but that's not what she meant by mercy. Mercy is like a wonderful thing that we can do. We can kill our babies so that we can have success in this world. So it is really not just a worship of Moloch, but it's a celebration of the worship of Moloch. We not only have Moloch worshipers, but we have people who celebrate that worship where we kill our babies for our personal gain.
Mm.
And that's exactly what it is. And what I was sharing with you and the rest of the staff is that we as a society have forgotten our roles. We've forgotten what women are here to do, what men are here to do. We don't know what that is. And if we say, I don't want to be confined or, um, I don't want to be just dwindled down to just a baby maker or something like that, or a man.
Right.
I don't know if men go, I don't want to be just identified as someone who provides for his family. It's not, and we have taken something that is glorious that God has given us, and we have now taken that as, I don't want to be simplified into this, menial thing, when it is one of the most glorious things that we could do as a man or a woman.
Right.
So instead of having babies, which is one of the most glorious gifts that God has given humanity through women, we have now put that down as some kind of hindrance to our true task. Our true task apparently is to win an Oscar or some garbage like that. It's literally to have a golden idol and to place it on our walls. And for the golden idol, we will kill, we will murder, we will destroy anything that is good, anything that is holy, anything that God says is good, we will reject. And so that's what we see. And these are things that are being lauded and celebrated by the media. You may hate The View, but yeah, I think, what The View kind of is expressing is maybe they want to lead the charge, but what they are expressing is this really anti-God leftist agenda and ideology.
It is quite tragic indeed. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. Do you have any I mean, our current events were pretty upsetting. Do you have any
Yeah, there's a great current
uplifting?
event coming up. It hasn't happened yet, but in a month, we're expecting a mini Sam,
Oh yeah,
a
yeah, that's
little
true.
Sam Yang or Sam Yang, right? So
Yeah.
I have given many name suggestions.
Yeah.
Perhaps people in this podcast can also give some name suggestions. We know that she's going to be a girl, and so we would like some girl names. So I think Pastor Paul has offered Samantha as one, but that's your name, so that's weird.
No,
Um,
it's not really up for suggestions.
but if you do have a great suggestion, then please email us. I'm sure he'll take it.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure Peter alone will email us again. Um, did you know that Drake dropped his album last night?
well, I mean, going back to the little mini Sam, I think we're all kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah.
How is your wife doing?
She is stronger than me right now.
She always has been stronger than you.
No, not always.
I think.
Right now,
Always.
yeah, she's very very excited. We're very, very excited. Um Cleaning out the office for our baby room has been difficult. Say goodbye to a lot of my beloved books because I love books, and
Yeah. I mean, one thing that is sad that in about a month and a half, Sam is going to go on paternity leave.
yeah.
And that means someone else is going to take over as host. We were
Right.
thinking about maybe one of the ladies of The View, but if we could get them, if we can't get them, it'll definitely have to be someone else. Yeah.
Definitely not the ladies of the View. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. Yeah, that's pretty uplifting. Speaking of uplifting, I just wanted to close with one interesting question. I realized people don't really know you as much as they should. By that I mean they don't know fun facts about you. So, what is your favorite Thanksgiving pie?
I could tell you what it's definitely not. It's definitely not frozen
Oh my,
pecan pie from Costco.
wait, I thought you liked that.
It's okay, but it's not my favorite.
It's apple though. I know your favorite's apple.
Yeah, yeah. I really like classic American apple pie.
A la mode or not a la
No
mode?
mode.
Really?
Just,
No mode.
yeah. If it's mode, I'll eat it.
Yeah. I love a la
But I
mode.
do like my apple pie.
I mean,
Pecan pie is good too. It's just not my favorite.
so
Pumpkin pie is great.
I
Pumpkin
do
spice
like
latte, however, that's questionable.
Yeah, I do enjoy a frozen pecan pie. Interestingly enough, as we close, um, after I mentioned that I liked frozen pecan pies from Kirkland, multiple people have bought me humongous Kirkland pies, and it's a lot of calories.
When you go to Costco, these holiday pies go quick.
Yes,
They're
yes,
very
yes.
popular. So if you haven't tried a Kirkland pie, yeah, I recommend.
Yeah, I used to call Costco like multiple to try to find out who has the pecan pie, but they'll be coming out soon. And what will also be coming out soon is our next episode. So we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we talk about the 10 commandments, especially the first and second commandment. This is going to be good because, like, for example, should we have pictures of Jesus in our books? Can we get, we need the organ sound on that one. Like Brian, if he's not, yeah, Brian, please. Tune in next week to find out. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.